Hey everybody, welcome to the Blendr Report, where news meets rational thinking. I'm your host, Jonathan Harvey. This is your co-host, Liam DeBoer. Liam, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to be chatting about the Liberals tabling a border security bill that would vastly expand their surveillance powers, Doug Ford declaring war on DEI in schools and universities, Trump warning Musk of consequences as the rift with the billionaire deepens, Carney says Canada will hit NATO defense target in 2025, years ahead of schedule, Big Tech pushing back against Canada's cultural funding demands, and the wisdom of Epictetus and how our judgments, not circumstances, cause anxiety. All right, let's get started. All right, first off, we've got Liberals table sweeping border security bill with major surveillance powers. The Liberal government has introduced Bill C-2, an extensive 139-page law expanding federal powers in border security, surveillance, intelligence sharing, financial crime enforcement, and the Canadian Coast Guard's role. Key provisions grant CSIS and other agencies expanded surveillance capabilities, including warrantless access to communications data and mail searches. The bill tightens asylum rules by limiting late claims and closing loopholes in cross-border protections, with retroactive effects. It also enables mass suspension of immigration applications for public health or security reasons. The Canadian Coast Guard gains authority to conduct security patrols and share intelligence with military and security agencies. Enhanced container and export inspections empower the CBSA, while tougher penalties and new limits on cash transactions target financial crimes. Nearly all electronic service providers must prepare data for law enforcement access. The public safety minister defends the bill as balancing civil liberties and security, though experts like Wesley Wark warn it marks a profound expansion of surveillance and law enforcement powers with minimal public scrutiny. So, does Bill C-2 reflect a necessary response to security threats or a dangerous expansion of state power?
I think it's important to look at this from both sides, because I think that if you look at the foundation of what they're saying the bill is for, I see some value. But then when you look at the reality of it being several hundred pages and mostly to expand state power, then you see the negative sides of it. Now, sure, there's definitely global instability. So I think you can look at terrorism, cyber threats, smuggling. You can look at a lot of these issues we have and say, okay, this bill will improve that situation. You can also say immigration is a real problem. You can look at the asylum seekers. You can look at their ability to now shut that off whenever they want to. They can deny large swaths of immigration if they deem it necessary for national security. I see that as a positive because things are out of control. And they got out of control under the Liberal government, under Trudeau's Liberal government, rather. Now, what Carney's doing, this is sort of a stopgap measure. Now, I don't know how they will use it, if they will use it effectively, but if you look at it that way, I don't really have a problem with it because we do need some sort of legal tool to get in the middle of this, right? Now, you look at some other things, you might say, okay, enhanced coordination between CSIS and CBSA and even the Coast Guard. You could say, okay, well, realistically, if they're all federal organizations, their improved communication can be seen as a positive. Realistically, I'm good with that. Financial crime controls, you can argue that it's a positive because you and I know how much money laundering happens in this country. It's one of the top 10 businesses, depending on if you're on the high end or the low end. So, okay, I see some value there, right? Now, here's where the problems start, though. I would say the arguments against it really are warrantless surveillance. And that's just not even just digital surveillance. That's also your physical mail now. The only physical mail I get are my bills. You're welcome to have them. But you know what I mean? It's just sort of this, it's an uncomfortable breach of personal privacy. And then on that, with the warrantless surveillance, you have sort of forced compliance by these service providers. So anybody providing a digital service in Canada, and this is very vague language. The way that I interpreted this, I always go to the extreme because I know that that's the potential that they could go to. So when I look at this as any digital service provider, I go, well, social media is a service. Cloud services, we put everything on Google. That's a service. I pay for that. Financial services, I do all my banking online. So these are digital services. So now they all have to have data on all of us ready to go, prepared that they can just pass off to the government whenever requested. And that doesn't always need a warrant either. So that means that they're basically tapped into every component of your life because let's be realistic, everything is digital. Sure, you can get cash and that doesn't have to be digital. But the majority of our banking is done online. The majority of everything we do is done online. So they have access to all this stuff now through this sort of rule. To me, I think that's pretty dark. You also have to consider, I'm okay with the Coast Guard in the communication side of things, but it's a civilian agency. And now they're going to be militarized, very likely. So you look at that and you're kind of going, okay, militarizing civilian agencies, whose best interest is that in? And I'm not sure that it's for us. I don't see that necessarily. Like, why wouldn't you just expand the military? We already know that's the problem. You've already got it. Here's why. You already have a system in place to train those people effectively. Maybe they're doing a bad job of it right now, but that's where they go. They go there because they have to meet a set of standards, and you make sure that they're willing to toe this line, whatever this line may be. But if you're giving people in a civilian agency similar power without going through the same rigorous training or the same process, what does that do? What kind of situation does that put us in? To me, I think it's pretty volatile, if I'm being honest. Like, again, if they're just doing communication, not a problem. But if they're militarized, I see that as a bit of an issue. And then finally, I would say, this is getting minimal public debate or scrutiny so far. So guys like us will talk about it. But again, if you look at the mainstream media, this is basically just being spun as a positive, and the liberals doing their job to clamp down on immigration, but it's not really what's happening.
Well, my thing is because, yeah, I do find myself conflicted here because obviously crime is a major issue. And for instance, border security, we've seen, right, the amount of people being apprehended at the Canada-US border that are on terror watch lists is skyrocketing. I think the peak year was 2021. However, it is definitely a issue. Even Kash Patel, the FBI director, has warned that cartels are starting to do more business and production in Canada now that America is clamping down even harder on the southern border, as well as even going into Mexico to run operations attacking the cartels there. But so I can kind of see, yes, okay, the government needs something or more powers to deal with this. But the issue I have with that is that even if, let's say, these institutions need more power in order to deal with this problem, the people in the institutions, the people that are going to be given this power, are deeply corrupt, as we know, whether it be the RCMP brass or whether it be the CBSA brass. All of this, right? We had Luke Sabrin on the podcast, and he was high up in the CBSA and had access to a lot of confidential stuff, right? And when he was asked to destroy evidence that could be linked back to the cartels, they ransacked his office and seemingly stole that evidence. And then he also estimated that roughly 7 out of the 12 high-ranking officers in his division were, this was kind of like speculation, but he said, I think 7 out of the 12 of them were compromised by the cartel.
Oh, that's wild.
And when he went through the whistleblower process internally, so not even going public with all of his claims, then his information was leaked to the cartel, and he actually had a cartel member show up at his home and threaten his family, right? So I can see, yes, again, that you might need resources or extra measures in order to crack down on this crime. But the real issue to me is the fact that the people that are going to be in the decision-making roles are the same people that have seemingly been working hand in hand with these bad actors or nefarious people. And so what does giving them more power do?
So effectively it falls short because you're trusting the same people who have already run this thing into the ground.
Right.
Yeah. You're just giving them more resources.
You're saying, I'm going to give this institution more resources and more power in order to deal with the problem. But if the people that are directing that institution don't have a motivation to actually try to stamp out the problem,
yes,
then all you're doing is giving corrupt people more power.
All you're doing is expanding state control over our privacy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's where I get very sketched out by this.
That's a good point.
Not even seeing that, yeah, okay, you might, like, even here's another great case example of it, right? With the e-pirate probe into money laundering that happened back in, I think it was 2016, 2017, somewhere in that neighborhood. And they were looking into Silver International Banking. And the main person in that case was Paul King Jin, who privately had meetings with Justin Trudeau. But that whole investigation, which the center of it was, a $200 million annual money laundering scheme running through these businesses, fell apart when the people conducting the investigation leaked information about anonymous people that were pivotal to the case. And it was very much speculated by a lot of people, both in those institutions like the RCMP and outside of them, that these leaks weren't by accident, that it was clearly purposeful sabotage of these investigations. And so again, okay, you're giving them more power to deal with the money laundering. You're saying, okay, no more cash transactions over $10,000, this kind of stuff, or we're going to come down on you. Well, if you've already got the means to conduct certain money laundering operations, pull them and highlight the people that are involved in these things, put them on trial essentially. But then again, the people that are in charge of making those decisions don't want to make the proper decision. Everything falls apart.
Yeah, but so that kind of, herein lies the bigger problem for Canadians, right? So you implement a piece of legislation that may even have some positives like this one, except that the institutions are so corrupt that it's not really about the policy. It's more about the infrastructure.
Right.
But we're not talking about changing the infrastructure. So what does it matter what policy gets pushed through?
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, I'm like, the question's tough because it's like, as a Canadian, where's your hope? What do you do? What is your next move? Because you're like, and even think about this from like this was something the Liberals brought up and the Liberals executed on. That's fine. So, but think about this from like a conservative perspective. If you got something you're championing through from the conservative side, and then you get them to pass it, or they finally go through with a bill because maybe you get some block support or some shit, who cares? But again, the infrastructure is the problem. So they're not going to enforce it, they're not going to use it, or they're going to abuse it. So what is the point of policy and legislation at this point?
Right. That's why for years, my biggest and pretty much only like my single, if I was a single issue voter, it would be accountability and corruption. Because I think we need large scale investigations like Bukele did in his own government, going, we're going to figure out who's on the take here, and you guys are going to actually face consequences for this.
I just don't think we've got the will here. I think that people are so duped at scale that they think everything's fine, and anyone who thinks otherwise is just some conspiracy theorist, that they're like, why would you possibly want to investigate these things? And then they would try to vilify you. It's just same thing with like the Elon Musk thing. Like, we didn't vote for him, get out. It's like, well, we know you didn't vote for him. You got appointed by the president. That's how that works. So shut up about that. Second of all, he's trying to save you money. Like, how is that a problem? But people can't deal with the fact that the institutions and the parties they support are completely corrupt, and that maybe there's no way through this through using policy.
Yeah. And that's the tough part. That's why I think that needs to be the first step, is accountability, in order to actually get anything done.
Okay, so let me ask you this question before we move on to the next topic. How long do you think it will take until Canada has a leader that is willing to do what is necessary to reform our system infrastructure?
I don't know. I thought we had already hit that rock bottom. We talk about how things have to be a certain level of
region beta paradox.
Right.
Yeah.
Things have to be bad enough for people to want change. I thought we were there for sure. You look at even, food insecurity numbers, 25% of Canadians now. Even with that stat, it is a little hard to say, because sometimes it's just, I think sometimes what they classify in those food insecurity numbers is being like, well, I would like the premium product, but I have to settle for the no name. It's like not necessarily that 25% of people are actually starving. It's just that they're making financial choices around food. But anyways, there's that. Then there's also even just the rampant corruption that we've already seen. Things like the Green Slush Fund, where they took $400 million out of $1 billion fund, right, and funneled it into liberal-friendly firms. We saw with the Arrive cab, actually just came out today, right, that they didn't use any proper procurement procedures when handing out $100 million for an app that should have only cost $80,000.
Yeah, another one actually just came out today too. Yesterday, actually, rather. In 2025, housing costs will be equal to 52%. 52% of your income will go to housing costs. That's an increase from 38% when Trudeau got into office. And a healthy economy, it should be around 30%.
Yeah.
So you look insane. At what else do you need to see? But yeah.
Yeah, and I think this goes to the whole media apparatus, right? And this is why, is because Canadian media is so heavily subsidized by the government that until there is a more free market in Canada when it comes to information, I don't think maybe we'll ever get there.
I'm concerned that I don't see it happening anytime soon. I'm concerned that I don't see it in my lifetime. I'm actually just concerned because I think they've done such a good job of the dog and pony show in convincing people. And I mean, I have conversations with people that are liberal all the time, and I just kind of go like, you're just not getting any of the real information, or you're just not getting enough. You're not getting enough information to make these decisions. You sit there and defend these things, but you just don't have any information. So how can you and I were talking about this earlier. How can I have a rational debate with someone who only has 1/4 of the information they need required to actually have an opinion on something? And that's like, I think that they're sort of banking and or preying on that fact that they go, I can keep you in the dark. I can feed you what I want to feed you, and I got control of you. And this is where we're going to stay for as long as I feel like. That's how kind of I see Canada in a nutshell right now. So yeah, I actually, the reason I asked is because I don't see it. I don't see us doing anything dramatic enough here to actually have a leader that would mimic even a westernized version of Bukele to fix this mess. So I don't see it. Dark.
Well, there is a silver lining in our next story, which is Ontario declares war on DEI in schools and universities. Ontario Premier Doug Ford's government has introduced Bill 33, a major reform signaling the decline of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, as a guiding principle in provincial schools and universities. The legislation mandates post-secondary admissions based strictly on merit, ending unspoken quotas or equity adjustments, favoring group identity over achievement. It also reasserts provincial control over school boards, particularly in large cities, blocking ideologically motivated renaming of schools and restating school resource officers to enhance safety. Significantly, the education minister gains sweeping powers to override trustees, aiming to enforce fiscal responsibility and curb wasteful spending, such as expensive bureaucratic trips. While critics warn that these reforms could harm underrepresented students, supporters argue the charges restore fairness, prioritize students over political agendas, and reject politicized classrooms. Bill 33 represents a cultural pivot in Ontario education, from identity politics back to meritocracy, accountability, and a focus on learning. So, is this maybe a step in the right direction for Ontario, and hopefully dominoes fall and across Canada?
I mean, it is. I don't know that you're going to see anything similar across the board, maybe in Alberta, maybe Manitoba. But I think the other provinces are for the most part, pretty left leaning. I think you're going to see a lot of these things exist.
I think Saskatchewan would as well.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe. I mean, yeah. Is that Mo?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that too. Actually, I'd see that over Manitoba. Yeah, good call. Which is positive, but it's interesting though, specifically in the education system, that's where this is that's where the battle is actually being fought on this, right? So you've got the largest number of people championing these ideas being teachers, and a lot of the administration above them. It's not until you get a little higher that you really see a big pushback here. So I think it's going to be a dogfight to see this spread across Canada, but it is good to see in Ontario. I mean, I was reading some of the media stuff on this. It's just nonsense what the left-wing media was writing about it. Because ultimately this is positive, right? You do go back to merit-based admissions. Life should be a meritocracy. Sorry, it's just the way it should be. I'm not saying that if you can't provide for yourself, you should die. I still believe in social programs. I still believe that if capitalism works well, only 10 to 20% of society will ever need social programs, really. Sure, you can, not including like free healthcare, quote unquote, but you know what I mean? Like social assistance because you're struggling.
Well, I think there's a really big difference between caring about people and not letting them starve on the street, and also weighting admissions in universities different so that, let's say, a white kid who has spent their entire life trying to master a certain thing or want to go into a certain industry and have worked really hard to get there, have higher grade averages or whatever, and then all of a sudden taking somebody that's from a quote-unquote equity deserving group, so
sure,
whatever minority you feel like claiming them to be, and then weighting that person's admissions higher when, okay, like, to me, those two things, I know that they get wrapped up a lot, which is like, oh, well, we're just taking care of people. It's like, that is a completely different thing from weighting people's admissions differently based on their skin color.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's why I see the world as it should be a meritocracy. It doesn't mean I went to the extreme to say I still believe that we should have some social programs, but these don't fall under that. So this is certainly a positive move in the right direction. I think you would actually remove some of the like reverse discrimination stuff that we're seeing, the reverse racism stuff that you're seeing, like that sentiment will kind of go away once you get rid of these things. Because people say, well, that's not real. It's like, well, you can't discriminate against one race and it not be racism. You can call it whatever you want. You can say you can't be racist against white people. You say that, you're dumb. Or you've just redefined the word, one of the two. Because if you're doing exactly what you just said and saying, I'm not letting this white kid, even though this other kid from some other nationality is doing worse than he is, well, then that is racist. That's what that is. So you'll at least see some of that sort of fall away. And to my point earlier, I think that this is a positive thing to give the provinces more control rather than these smaller districts, because when you have got a system that is rampant, runaway with ideology, and they're all on the same page, it's like you need sort of top-down control, which I'm not usually a big fan of, but you need it to sort of correct course. Otherwise, you're fighting all these little wars, but who's going to fight them if the districts can control it themselves? You effectively can't if you have no power over them. So giving the province the control, in my opinion, is actually better in this case because it's gotten where it has. If everybody's doing a reasonable job of educating our children and keeping this stuff out of schools, I don't really care about the nuance from community to community. I think that's fine. But when it's gotten to this point and they're all sort of in lockstep on this very broken agenda, you need top-down control or you can't fix it. So for me, I think that's actually a really big positive. I think the reforms are going to hopefully prioritize learning and accountability over political and ideological agendas, and that's the goal. So I believe, yes, to answer your question, this is a positive step in the right direction. I think it will be fought. I think that teachers themselves who are really, really gung-ho on this ideology will continue. I think several will probably lose jobs. I think they will continue teaching these kids a lot of this nonsense because they think it's their, I don't know, moral duty, if you will. I don't know what else to call it. But this is a step in the right direction.
Well, I don't even know if it's necessary that you need decentralization, but you need to get rid of the incentive structure for the insanity that is, you need to get rid of the incentive structure for the policies that are driving this insanity. So for instance, we even see this in media, right? Through the Canadian Media Fund, and I'm almost certain that it'd be very similar in the education realm, although I haven't dove into this particularly. But within, say, the Canadian Media Fund, $357 million a year gets handed out to media companies to subsidize them, but 87% of those grants were going to storylines about equity-deserving groups, right? And so I think it's very similar probably in the education realm where it's, you can get more funding for your schools if you have these equity groups and whatever. So I don't even necessarily think about it in terms of...
That is kind of top-down control, though, because if the incentive is coming from the top,
for sure,
then it fits a little bit too, right?
Right. And I think, like, I'm a big believer in the idea that power should be decentralized, and because this is the thing is that you see a lot of parents, and I've been talking to more and more of them recently, where they'll go, okay, well, we're concerned about what our kids are being taught. We go to the school, we tell them about this, we tell the principal and the teachers we don't like what this is doing, but then it's, well, this is just, this is part of the curriculum and this is what we're supposed to teach within the Ontario School Board. But I don't know. I do see maybe, you need somebody to come in and just break that up, but I can also understand that because essentially what this bill does is it gives veto power to the education minister for the province, seemingly like across the board on a lot of things.
Yeah, like naming the schools, what's in the curriculum, a lot of this other crap. I agree with it because, look, ultimately, I think about it this way. If you live in a district, like you just said, and you go to the school and you go, stop teaching this nonsense to my kids. He's an 8-year-old boy. I don't want him thinking about sexuality. Whatever his interests are when he's older, that's just fine. Today's not the day. Shut up. And they go, that's part of the curriculum. Deal with it, pal. You got nowhere to go to because if you go talk to, the district school board, they're like, well, the province, and the province goes, well, they actually get to make the decisions. You kind of get this runaround. Now there's one person I can speak to. Wonderful. Now we have someone that we can go to that has to be accountable for this and answer to us. I think to fix that problem, I think it's really good that we now have a single individual or a single sort of board or group of people that we can go talk to be like, this is the will of the people. Impose this. Enough. I think that this is a better way for us to correct course.
I still think this isn't even on the table or anything within this bill, but I still think the best way to fix a lot of the issues within education is to offer tax advantages and tax incentives and tax breaks to parents that homeschool their own children.
I was reading something the other day, and I know I will miss this slightly, so don't exactly quote me on it, but I'm very close. The percentage likelihood of your kids today graduating and making $100,000 from traditional school, like the schools in the education system, versus homeschool, 10% make 100,000 right now. If you graduated from regular school, 35% for those that are homeschooled.
Wow.
It's dramatically, and I know that's just economics, just finance. Well, money's not everything, Jonathan. Cool. But money pays for your house and your food and your car and allows you to do whatever you want to do. So it's just interesting to see. Now, you could hyper focus on, well, homeschool will probably teach kids about finance and taxes and how to manage their credit and this and that. Like, yeah, everybody should be doing that. So you could argue that that's just sort of a siloed issue, but I'd take that stat all day for the homeschooling side.
Yeah, for sure. I also just think even for me, I didn't do bad in school, but I also didn't do well per se. I think
really?
Yeah, if I look back at my report cards, I remember I did this a few years back and it was pretty much like 70s across the board. So just like average.
Dummy.
Yeah. But this was the thing, is that I was so socially anxious as a kid that I couldn't pay attention in class.
Right.
So I was too worried about what the other kids thought about me or bullying or this or that it was like the coursework and what I'm actually supposed to be learning is so low on my priority list right now. And I also just didn't have any interest in most of the things that they were teaching.
Yeah,
I really didn't care. And so and that was the big thing for me, I think, was just going, okay, I don't have any incentive to work hard or apply myself in this environment. And so I didn't. But then what's funny is, then you get outside of that. And I definitely have a deep resentment towards the public school system for that, because I equated learning with anxiety and stress. Whereas now I love it. Like,
interesting.
There's pretty much nothing I'd rather do.
I always did well in school. I didn't like it, but I have like a mental illness where like I have to just my brain says you have to win, you have to do good at things. Like that's here for some of your self-worth comes from, is in success and in accomplishment. So I didn't have to care about the curriculum or the incentive structure. I had my own incentive structure, which is don't be a fucking loser, go figure out how to win. So I just did, but I didn't like it. Like I wasn't like I was happy to get out when I got out, you know what I mean? But no, that was kind of my journey. Before we move on to the next topic, this episode is brought to you by the Tallow Truth. Your skin needs real nourishment, not lab experiments. That's why I use F-Bomb from the Tallow Truth, made from grass-fed, grass-finished tallow. It's also hormone-free, antibiotic-free, steroid-free, GMO-free, and even vaccine-free, because I know that's important to a lot of you. There's nothing artificial, nothing toxic. And recently, Ben and the gang at Tallow Truth dropped some new products. Their Freedom Face Whip is hands down the nicest thing I've ever put on my face, and they've also launched a new soap line made with grass-fed tallow and organic essential oils. What makes the Tallow Truth even better is that they're a freedom-first brand that supports Blendr News and everything we stand for. They even offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you've got nothing to lose. Go to the tallowtruth.com/blender and use code BLENDER for 15% off. This includes 15% off on already discounted bundles as well, so you can save as much as 40%. That's the tallowtruth.com, code BLENDR at checkout for 15% off.
All right, moving on to our next story. We've got Trump warns Musk of consequences as rift with the billionaire deepens. The once cooperative relationship between former U.S. President Donald Trump and billionaire Elon Musk has soured, with Trump warning Musk of serious consequences if he supports Democrats in the upcoming midterm elections. In a candid interview, Trump declared their relationship effectively over, citing past favors he did for Musk during his first administration. The feud escalated after Musk publicly condemned Trump's recent spending bill as fiscally irresponsible, sparking a heated exchange, including Musk's now deleted claims about Trump's ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Vice President J.D. Vance criticized Musk's attacks, but praised his efforts as head of the Department of Government Efficiency, hoping for Musk's return to the Republican fold. The contested spending bill extends 2017 tax cuts, but is projected to increase the deficit by $2.4 trillion and cause millions to lose health insurance. This public rupture signals deepening divides between tech leadership and political power as both prepare for the 2026 midterm elections, with potential consequences for federal contracts and political alliances. So, what factors do you think contributed to the breakdown of the Trump-Musk alliance?
First of all, Musk gave Trump like $300 million to win, and then turned around and didn't do any of the things he said he was going to do. And I recognize that was a macro statement. I mean, he's done a lot of things he said he would do, but not the things that Musk was really worried about. His big, beautiful spending bill. Why would you name it that? It's a spending bill. It's not nothing about it's beautiful. But anyway, it's a very Trump thing to do. That just rubbed me the wrong way. I thought it was dumb. And a lot of the Doge cuts that he was there to implement are not being implemented. So he's like, I've given you an opportunity to do this, to save this money. You're not even doing it. Like what? This is what we signed on for. This is why I'm here. We needed this sort of economic or financial revolution, and you're not doing any of the things you said you would do. Now, I mean, a lot of it is also the senators not voting for it and whatever, like the political will on the inside of the system. But I think that for me is where a lot of this starts. But now I think it's a little worse. Like now there's definitely some personal grievances. You know, you don't say that the president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, isn't releasing the Epstein list because he's on it. You know, like I was like, I don't know, all right, let's fucking go, gloves off. So I mean, that's definitely gonna, keep this conflict alive. Trump did say today, though, actually, he's like, I'll talk to Elon. We're good. I'm not going to sell my red Tesla or anything. So I think that they would maybe hash it out. But I think if you look at the bigger picture, I think that the bigger picture is from the political power side, because the midterm's coming up in 2026. Because Elon does have a lot of, carries a lot of clout, and he can persuade a lot of people. And if he goes back hard enough against Trump, he could once again sort of become an ally to the Democrats. Even like, not even directly, but like as a proxy, just because of his distaste for the Republican Party, which would work against them in a big way, especially considering the Democrats have control of the media down there as well. Not to the same degree as in Canada, but like 70-30, where here it's like 99-1. So that could actually be another big thing. In fact, I think that may be the biggest thing is, sure, we can have our little rift. That's not a problem. But how do they patch this up, and do they patch it up? I think that's kind of the bigger concern, because he did make a pretty, Trump threat, but he made a Trump threat to Elon, saying there'd be pretty significant consequences if he started backing the Democratic Party. So that's what leads me to believe that's what this is more about than anything, but we'll see how it plays out.
Well, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out whether this is even genuine beef, right, what this is all coming from, because there's a couple different things I could see.
The Democratic mind bend thing?
Well, I also too think, okay, there's from the public backlash that Elon has faced over the last year or two is no joke after backing Trump.
So maybe Trump did this to help him out.
Well, okay, like
you could argue. I thought about that. You could argue
getting firebombed.
You could argue
this,
that,
right?
Yeah. Like, oh, you're leaving? Let me do you a favor.
Or it's hey, we need to...
you went a little far with the Epstein stuff, though, dude. Like, you know what I mean? I could see it.
Well, and this is where I see it. It's like, okay, do they, quietly behind doors shake hands and say, let's have a public fallout so that, the heat kind of comes off of me a little bit?
Yeah.
Or there's also the other aspect where maybe this heat that Elon has taken on has actually just caused him to become a little bit more emotionally unstable. And this is just a genuine lash out of the fact that this is a lot of pressure and stress that, I don't think any human is designed to deal with that level of being under a microscope, but then also even just the violent attacks, the death threats constantly, all of this kind of stuff.
I agree with that.
So 100% I could see them becoming, anybody in that scenario becoming more emotionally unstable. Then there's also the speculation that he's taking a lot of ketamine and stuff for depression. I think he's been open about the fact that he takes it for that. But then did you even see that video of him like kind of rolling around dazing eyes in the Oval Office?
I heard, but he was very adamant that he wasn't high on drugs.
Maybe. It looked exactly like...
Yeah, it's like I saw some Justin Bieber clip the other day, and he was talking to some girl. It wasn't his wife. I don't remember who it was. And the look on, I was like, okay, I've partied in my life. I know what's up. I look at this kid. I'm like, oh, you're waxed, buddy. You're out to lunch. It's daylight. You shouldn't be partying that hard. Holy fuck. So I didn't see the Elon one, but when you saw the Elon one, was it like that bad? Were you like, uh-oh?
It was pretty bad.
You're like, uh-oh.
It was the schnozberries taste like schnozberries.
Oh, damn. He's
Yeah.
licking the wallpaper?
Pretty much. Like not not actually,
I know
but his eyes were rolling around and the fidgeting. But I mean, hey, then again, you've also always got the thing with Elon where you just go, he's a weird and eccentric dude, obviously, too.
Christina Freeland was like that a lot, though. I think she was on a cocktail of some stuff, but whatever.
But this is the thing, is like those positions, this goes back to that point of those positions are extremely stressful, and I don't think any human is designed to deal with that level of stress. Now, you can mitigate it to a certain degree, but it is going to wear on you one way or another. But who knows? Maybe it is kind of a handshake deal behind closed doors, because you're already seeing them kind of starting to
patch it up.
I don't know. Or maybe he's just becoming more and more manic. I really don't know.
There's also the theory that I heard that was kind of like, yeah, I get it. Like, I think this is a bit of a stretch, but like suggesting that the two of them feuding with each other would put the Democratic constituents in a real bind, because it's like, what do you do? Who do you support? What do you say? Because you vilified both continuously, except now Trump didn't do the cuts that Elon wanted them to do. So then you'd have to favor Trump if you're a Democrat, because he kept everybody in place and he's spending all this money. So how could the Democrats be mad? But he's also spending all this money, so the Democrats should be mad. But Elon's now going against him. So now I shouldn't be upset with Elon because he's going against Trump. So you see this, like they're stuck in this, like, what do I do? And the Democrats came out and kind of supported Elon right away. I was like, guys, just shut up. Just don't do anything. So there's this whole theory that it's basically just to rile up or confuse or try to call out some sort of, I don't know, like cognitive dissonance in the Democratic Party. I think that's a bit of a stretch, but I sort of see it a little bit.
Well, the other theory that's floating around too is because of the EV subsidies and how Trump is wanting to pull back on those. And
he actually suggested it. Elon said you shouldn't be subsidizing these.
And this is the thing, is this is why I don't believe that's the catalyst causing this, is because nobody, even before the election cycle, nobody would have thought that Trump was going to
be a proponent of EV subsidies. Fuck that. Also, like,
that's not a surprise.
No, not even a little bit. I agree. And I also think anytime someone says this is about money, I think you're an idiot. I think you're an idiot. Elon's got $400 billion.
Is that what he's up to now?
$393.8 billion. So yeah, $400 billion. He's a sneeze away from $400 billion. Only $6.2 billion away.
That's insane.
So anybody that's just like, oh, this is about subsidies or money or business. No, it's not. No, 100% it's not. The guy already makes all the money in the world. We're good.
I can see that, like, let's say, okay, over the past few months, more and more emotional distress, more and more stress itself. But then, I can see, okay, Trump tables this spending bill, and you sit here and you go, hey, we ran a whole campaign on the fact that we were going to eliminate unnecessary spending and overspending. And so now you just come around and you do the exact opposite of that. That I can see kind of being a blind side.
Sure.
Unlike the EVs.
I think for me, the big thing is this. I gave you $300 million to change the world and to change America because we're going down the wrong path. And yeah, you're doing it in some ways, but you're not doing it in the way that you implemented me to help fix. So yeah, I'm pissed off. I get it. This bill is ridiculous. No one should be voting for it. It's way too much debt. And you did not enforce any of the cuts that I suggested that would actually save the American people money. Why did I give you? So it's kind of like I paid you for something in a sense, and you gave me nothing in return.
Mm-hmm.
Well, go fuck yourself. Not only that, but how much of my time did you take? I'm worth $400 billion. How much of my time? You took the last 6 months of my time and you're doing nothing? So it's not only a slap in the face because of the $300 million, but the 6 months of effort as well. I'd be fucking pissed.
Well, and on top of that, right? Because Doge really hasn't been doing all that much in terms of cutting. It's more so just highlighting. It's almost like Doge has been creating reports and saying, here is where the wasteful spending is, and then needing Congress.
Well, of course, they can't actually make the cuts, but you know what I mean.
But then Congress isn't going through with it, right? They wouldn't codify those cuts.
Right, exactly. And that's what he's pissed. And I would be pissed too. I'd be like, you got me here to do this. You know, I was talking to someone the other day who was a politician, and she said to me, you know, you go through this system and you sit there and you do all these reports and it costs taxpayer dollars and you debate these issues and you put all these reports together. And then they do nothing with them. They put them on the shelf. They do zero with it. I go, that would make me want to blow my brains out. She goes, yeah, me too. It's a ridiculous system we have. So I get his position from that perspective.
Yeah. All right, moving on. So this next story comes from Ground News, who we've partnered with here at Blendr. They track how news is covered across this political spectrum so you can see the full picture without the spin. So next topic is Canada to hit NATO defense target in 2025, Carney says, years ahead of schedule. Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced that Canada will meet NATO's defense spending target of 2% of GDP this year, accelerating the previous deadline by nearly a decade. Speaking at the Munk School of Global Affairs, Carney outlined a 4-pillar plan focused on rebuilding defense infrastructure, modernizing military capabilities, strengthening Canada's defense industry, and expanding international partnerships. A key priority is shifting procurement towards domestic manufacturing, reducing reliance on U.S. suppliers. The investment package includes new submarines, fighter jets, warships, artillery, drones, and Arctic operations, alongside promised pay raises for Canadian Armed Forces members and an expanded role for the Canadian Coast Guard in northern regions. To oversee acquisitions, Carney announced a new defense procurement agency led by Stephen Fuhr. With NATO discussions underway to raise spending targets further, Canada's sudden jump aims to bolster geopolitical relevance and military credibility. However, the plan's cost, potentially tens of billions, may provoke political debate and parliamentary approval remains uncertain. So what challenges might Canada face in ramping up military capabilities on such an accelerated timeline?
Well, first things first, what you mentioned is the budget constraints, right? Like it's so funny that our federal government spends so much money and says it's so hard to find money. It's like, well, you're spending over $500 billion a year. I don't think it's that hard to find it. You continue raising taxes, you continue, increasing the size of the CRA to take more of our money. But I think that they may face some budget constraints or at least pushback on that. I think that's a minor part because I think that's just about PR, if I'm being honest with you. One of the interesting ones, though, is procurement and supply chain issues. They have procurement officers that their whole job is just to procure things, and they still can't buy the equipment they need. I don't know why that's the case, but I've read multiple pieces of multiple reports and multiple different articles on this. For some reason, they cannot seem to fill this procurement and supply chain line. So for me, that's going to be another problem. Just because you have the money doesn't mean you're going to get it, especially on time. I mean, you look at military contracts, they're like, yeah, they're going to buy, a dozen F-35s. They'll be here by 2042. You're like, what? What are you talking about? I'm going to be dead by then. Let's hope not. But you know what I mean? They do that kind of thing where they make these plans, but it's something you're going to see for another 5-10 years. So for me, I think procurement is actually going to be a big problem. The next thing is obviously the workforce and training. Not workforce, but the actual military. We're way under militarized right now, and no one's interested in being a part of it. So you can throw funding at something, but if you don't have the infrastructure or the people or the workforce, as I'd put it, how do you actually implement these things? It's like, well, we have the money for it. It's great, but what are you actually doing with it? Right? I think that's the other side of it. And I think one of the big things with the military, after talking with Brian Isted last week, was the culture's dead. Right?
Yeah.
And you and I called this out. You and I have done multiple podcasts. We've talked about hey, look, military's got to be a family. There's a reason for this. Your job is to die for your country if you need to, but it's to defend your nation. You have to be a family. You can't throw in divisive tactics like DEI and expect to maintain that. And he was also, he had mentioned the person they made the head of the military right now, which I think was the first female ever to lead the military. I don't know if she's a lesbian. She looks like one, though. I don't mean to be rude. She just looks like a stereotypical lesbian. But anyway, but what Brian had said was that there were a dozen people that were far more qualified for that role. So you just look at what's happening in the culture of the military, and I think they're going to have trouble, money or not, of keeping people on board. Actually, I read something today that they're now increasing bonuses for retention in the military. That's something Carney just introduced this afternoon. So you're seeing them trying to hang on to people, but I think it's going to be a struggle. Then the other big thing is really going to be political and public opinion, right? Because the liberals have been, well, we don't have enough money for this. We don't have enough money for this. We're not really, it's almost like they take the role of pacifism in a sense. But it's like, yeah, but it's your military. Like the rest of you can be pacifists, but the military needs to be here to defend the nation. But that's kind of like the political party umbrella they wear with this kind of stuff. So I think
they have unlimited money to send to feminist protests in Africa, but they don't have money for defense budgets.
Right. But again, so it's political and public opinion, right? Because you look at how they're wasting money and they go, yeah, but we're moving the needle, Jonathan. No, you're not. You guys are morons and you're wasting our money. So I think that could be something they face. Again, all these points that I'm making are things that I think are manageable, other than fixing the culture within the military. The rest of those things are all manageable if you can spin them properly with PR, which I think the Liberals can effectively do. I think they are masters of PR. I think they've done a really, really great job. I don't agree with it, but I think they're really good at what they do.
Well, in, our sponsor for this topic, right, Ground News, the reason that they're so great is because you do see, okay, they highlight left-leaning source, right-leaning source. They tell you how many from each source is showing you, but then also the headlines back to back, right? So you can even see in this one, the Toronto Star says, Mark Carney revives tough talk about America and warns a new imperialism threatens. And then you can also see a lot of talk in them as well, like another one by U.S. News saying that they want to decrease reliance on U.S. defense. And this is kind of the motivation behind doing them. But then at the exact same time, you're seeing stories about how there's backroom deals between Carney and Trump negotiating both trade and security frameworks right now. How also apparently Carney is interested in joining this whole Golden Dome alliance with America, which I'm assuming would be very similar to, say, the Israel Iron Dome kind of thing, but for all of North America.
Yes.
And so you can just see, it is amazing to kind of see in these headlines how just one source to the next completely changes how the topic is viewed. And then when you understand as well that the average person is solely taking in headlines, not even reading the articles, you can see how this would distort things very easily. But I also think when it comes to this defense spending thing, this is one of those topics that I really liked Pierre Poilievre's idea of spend a dollar, save a dollar, because I'm all for having a functional and strong military.
Yes.
But I also think, okay, we're already in crippling deficits. We are on our way to debt collapse in Canada. And so it's like, where is this? Yeah, tens of billions of dollars of spending from? You know what they're going to do. They're either going to increase taxes or they're going to print more money. It's one of the two. It's
always one of the two.
It's always one of those two. And so you look at it and go, okay, I would rather there be a third option, which is we're now not going to spend $10 billion a year on foreign aid in funding rent-a-riots in Africa to overthrow regimes that we, would rather be more favorable of. We're not going to give countless money to the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank so that the CCP can fund infrastructure projects in other countries. Like, these things make zero sense, but they're not doing that. They're just greenlighting more spending.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the headlines you're seeing on Ground News, one of the other ones that I saw that resonated with me is from the National Post that said, meeting our NATO target wasn't that hard after all. That's the actual story. For me, that was the actual story. Like, I'm kind of going, you can tell me the nonsense about Carney reviving tough talk about America because he's, these new imperialism threats. You can give me all that nonsense. That's how you're justifying why it took so long for the Liberals to actually just move that needle. To literally just press a button on a computer, be like, oh, we're going to meet our defense spending now, our defense budget now. And for me, that was why, like, I looked at all of them and I went through all those headlines and I'm like, this to me was the only one that I'm like, oh, that's the actual truth. And I know it's not always the National Post or it's someone that's going to get it right, but I was like, you want to kind of see how this is being framed in so many ways. But because I've been doing this so long and you and I have been doing this so long, I'm able to sort of boil it down to be like, where's the truth? What's actually going on here? We should be able to meet our NATO target, no problem. Like you said, I could highlight $100 billion in nonsense spending in 20 minutes. 20 minutes annually. You could put 10% of that into the military, bang, hit your target. So this really wasn't that hard after all. All this other nonsense about doing it because of imperialism threats and America and independence and blah, blah, blah. none of it was difficult. It just wasn't part of the liberal agenda. That's just what it was. So it, for me, when I look at these and I kind of go, at least you could get the real story somewhere. Because I think that's what you and I try to do. That's what I try to do anyway, is I try to be like, hey, here's how you cut through the crap. I try not to, I know it seems like we favor one side over the other. It's just that the other side's the one that's been in power for now like over 10 years. So it's easy to see it that way. But I just kind of look for the truth. That's what this whole thing is for me. And, ultimately it's positive that we're meeting our defense budget. Now, interestingly enough, in the next few weeks, you might see NATO jump that to 5%. But they've got another solution for that, which is a military bank. So we'll see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, well, now too, even NATO's calling for a 400% increase in the alliance's air and missile defenses as well, on top of that 5% GDP number. But then also they're looking to launch a new multilateral defense, security, and resilience bank. So another international bank in order to bankroll these Western nations and NATO members in order to boost that GDP. So essentially, we'll be able to go further into debt in order to subsidize our military. But it does make you wonder, with all of this kind of stuff coming up, whether the powers that be in our countries, whether it be America, whether it be our own in Canada, are starting to see, like, if you increase spending on defense by, or at least call for it to be increased by 150%, you're probably banking on the fact that things are going to pop off globally.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Yeah, I think yeah, it's interesting. I saw that as one of two things. I saw that as like, hey, you're banking on there being World War III, like an imminent threat of World War III, or you just outed yourself as very unprepared.
Right.
And I couldn't figure out which one was which. And I saw kind of the two sides of those headlines as well. And I actually had those thoughts before I read them. I was like, I wouldn't have said that out loud. What do you mean? Because that's such a huge boost. Like, hey, maybe we need to double something, but 400% makes me think that you don't have much of anything. So I don't know. We'll see. Ultimately, I think that like we're coming to a time where we are going to see more militarized nations, but I don't necessarily think, like, I see it more as an economic move than because World War III is right here. So that wraps up our first segment with ground news. Now, if you're tired of biased headlines, algorithms feeding you what you want to hear, or just trying to figure out what's actually true, ground news is the tool that you would need. We partner with them because we actually use it and it helps. Their Vantage plan is what we use. It gives you all the headlines, the bias ratings, blind spot alerts for when one side is ignoring a story, and even shows you who owns the outlet you're reading. It's a media literacy tool that lets you see under the hood. And right now, you can get 40% off the Vantage plan using our link at groundnews.com/Blendr. That's their top tier plan for only around $6 a month. And trust me, it's worth every penny. And they're a Canadian company. Again, that's groundnews.com/Blendr, BLENDR, to get 40% off.
All right, moving on to our next story. We've got Apple, Amazon, and Spotify push back on Canada's cultural funding demands. A legal battle is unfolding in Canada as major streaming companies like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and Netflix challenge a new CRTC mandate requiring them to contribute 5% of their Canadian revenues to fund domestic content production, including TV news. The streaming giants argue the levy is unfair, illegal, and disproportionately burdens foreign companies, with Spotify labeling it a tax beyond regulatory authority. Apple and Amazon highlight discrepancies, noting Canadian radio stations pay much less despite limited access to funding. The Motion Picture Association Canada contests the requirement that 1.5% of revenues support local news, as streamers do not produce news content. The federal government and Canadian broadcasters defend the rule as essential to sustain Canada's media industry, which faces decline amid the rise of global streaming services benefiting from Canadian audiences without financial contribution. The CRTC's mandate seeks to rebalance funding to preserve Canadian cultural content in a rapidly changing digital landscape, but the dispute raises questions about fairness, jurisdiction, and the future of Canadian media. So, should foreign streaming platforms be required to fund Canadian content production, including news?
No, this is dumb.
Yes.
Quick one. Fuck all this. Look, first of all, it's a very disproportionate burden. A 5% levy is excessive. compared to any traditional broadcaster contribution. So that's insane.
And it's 5% of revenue too,
Yeah,
not profits.
That's wild. Like that is that's such a massive tax. I'm so sick of governments taxing tech companies like this through these roundabout policy implementations. It just drives me nuts. And then there's also the legal and jurisdictional thing. So platforms are basically claiming that this exceeds their regulatory authority, which I'm pretty sure it does. So I'm glad that these guys are pushing back. So I think this is absolute nonsense. And then it's also like, when I listen to the news organizations in Canada say we need to be funded by the government and by these other organizations so we can stay alive, I go, well, that's not capitalism. It's if you don't like the way that the market's changing, either adapt or die. I also think this may drive a lot of these tech platforms out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this last time, maybe 2 podcasts ago, but there's a cost-benefit analysis that you do based on the value of this economy. If you go, look, it's not worth it for me to give you 5% of my revenue to stay in the Canadian market. Hog off, I'm out. Like, I don't want to do this. Same that Instagram and Facebook, or Meta rather, are doing with Bill C-18, the Online News Act. They're just like, no, we're just not going to show you news anymore. Like, I don't care. We're not going to play that game. This is one level higher where they go, we're just not going to be in we're just not going to compete in that market anymore. It's just not worth it. So for me, this is quite a big issue, and I'm glad they're pushing back. And I hope that our judicial system does not side with the government like they usually do, because I think it may significantly limit independent voices in this country if we continue going down this path. We're already severely limited.
Yeah, I agree. And, you look at, they're trying to essentially leverage our population numbers in order to get this tax revenue. But Canada as a market, right? We've got 40 million people in Canada, roughly, going up 1 million a year, I guess. But
yeah, we're over 41 now.
But that's a drop in the bucket compared to a lot of markets in the world. So
it's peanuts.
So to your point about trying to, we're just going to leave that market instead of pay this money, then yeah, like that makes complete sense from a business standpoint. But I also think it's worse too when you talk about taking money from productive companies and subsidizing unproductive ones, because that is what's happening right now. They're going, well, see, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Facebook, all of these platforms, they're doing so well. We need to take some of that money and give it to the CBC and CTV News.
The organizations that we can control to use as a megaphone to maintain our control over society.
And that are doing worse and worse and worse. But I also think it's worse than that because it's a dying industry and dying platforms. It would be the way that I look at it right now, and them wanting to take money from these digital entities and give them to these more like kind of your legacy media outlets, is similar to, let's say when the oil and gas revolution first happened and energy started kicking off that way and really going down that route. It would be like governments at that time saying, we're going to take money from the oil and gas producers and give it to the people that are producing whale fat, because those are going to be dying industries. And you go, no, but that whole industry is going to go away.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily that it's just companies. It's the entire mechanism, the machine that you're funding is going to die.
Yes, I think the only reason you're seeing it happen is because it's the government's most potent weapon and they're not willing to let it go. Until they can find a way to get complete control over the digital space in whatever that looks like to them, they're going to continue funding that no matter what. They'll just keep using our tax dollars and justify it as in the interest of national security. Whatever the fuck they said about CBC the other day. Are you guys crazy? $1.53 billion a year for the CBC for national security?
Yeah.
You're high as a kite. They have $400 million worth of real estate. Get the fuck out of here. So for me, it's all a bunch of nonsense. It's just, misdirection and lies and using the exact tool for propaganda, using the exact tool they use for propaganda to propagandize us about the reason for keeping those tools alive.
All right, moving on to our last story for the day. The wisdom of Epictetus and how our judgments, not circumstances, cause anxiety. Epictetus, who lived from 50 to 135 AD, was a Greek Stoic philosopher who taught that true freedom comes from mastering one's own mind. Born a slave, he became a revered teacher, emphasizing that we cannot control external events, but we can control our reactions. His teachings have shaped Stoic thought for centuries. Epictetus explains that it's not events themselves that upset or disturb us, but our judgments and beliefs about those events. He states, it is not the things themselves that disturb men, but their judgments about these things. For instance, he points to death. Death is nothing dreadful, or else Socrates too would have thought so. In other words, if death were truly terrifying, even the wisest people like Socrates would fear it, but Socrates did not. What's actually frightening, Epictetus says, is the judgment that death is dreadful. This is the dreadful thing. He argues that our emotional suffering is not caused by circumstances, but by the way we interpret them. Therefore, when we feel upset, blocked, or sad, let us never blame anyone but ourselves. That means our own judgments. Instead of blaming others or outside events for our feelings, we should examine our own thinking. If we change our judgments, we can change how we feel. In simple terms, Epictetus is teaching us to take responsibility for our own minds, recognizing that the power to respond calmly and wisely is always within us. So are there situations where external events really are to blame, or is it actually always our judgment?
It's a very tough question because I think that you're in control of your life, and I think you should take control or responsibility for the things that happen to you. But there are moments like when you get T-boned in a car. You know what I mean? It's like you can say, well, if I, driven slower or driven faster or stopped to use the washroom or didn't get that cup of coffee, like, sure, your circumstance might have been different. But I think it's hard in those moments to take responsibility for that. I think that's a challenging one, right? Because I'm a firm believer that, like, hey, your life is your responsibility. Own it. Own everything about it. And when things like that happen, you can argue that it's sort of an external event that is to blame for the situation. However, I think that's 1%. I think 1% you can really blame on external events, and I think 99%. And I still think it's important that you have the right perspective on those events too. I think I'm a silver lining guy. I can look at issues that are, terrible, and when things are on fire, and even things with my own health, I can look at them and go, a lot of people will be very upset. You have this problem, it's chronic, whatever. I'm like, okay, but there's a silver lining here. Because of the lifestyle changes I make and this and that and blah, 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 I bet I gained 20 years for something that should have knocked off 10. So that's the way I see things. So I think your perspective is very, very important, even in moments when external events may be to blame. But the other 99%, no. The other 99%, I honestly believe that the emotional suffering is on you. I think you have to decide how you're going to manage those things. And don't get me wrong, I don't think having negative emotions if someone passes away or something like that is a bad thing. I think that's perfectly fine. I think you should always deal with the emotions that come to you. But again, that has nothing to do with the external world. That has everything to do with what's inside.
Well, I think, too, even taking your analogy about, say, the car crash, it's not necessarily that you're supposed to take responsibility for the crash itself, but how you react after that. Like, okay, even let's say worst case scenario, terrible accident, you lose control of and feeling in your legs, you become paraplegic, whatever. In that moment, I think it would be completely justified. It's not hard to find reasons to, say, complain about life in that circumstance. I think most people, including myself, could even look at somebody in that scenario and go, yeah, your negative view on this situation is warranted. However, the more empowering view that I think you could take is go, okay, I'm going to react to this circumstance in a way that inspires and motivates everyone else in a similar circumstance to take an upward path after this and not let this moment define their lives. Actually, even I was listening to an interview with Jeremy Renner recently.
Yeah, I listened to his Rogan podcast.
Wild story, because I remember when that first happened. So for context, it was like 2022 or something like that. Sometime during COVID, yeah, and it was like, oh, Jeremy Renner suffers accident while snow plowing his driveway, and so like in my eyes, because that's what he was doing, but in my eyes, I kind of got, oh, like, all right, his snow blowing machine like ran over his leg or something and broke his leg. I didn't realize that it was like a 15,000-pound vehicle that crushed his entire body to the point where his like eyeball was hanging out. And
I know, like, it's mental.
You're like, oh, that's different.
Yeah,
that's different. But then to the point that I'm trying to say is that, okay, he took a stance where he goes, I'm not going to let this moment define me. I'm going to actually overcome this. And now he's at the point where he's running again. Now he had like 30 something broken bones in his body. He was completely destroyed, but it was that mindset afterwards that allowed him to overcome it. It was his perspective he took on it.
Yes.
Because this is, and you know what, let's maybe bring this back around to even say our own pursuit or what we do. We give a lot of information about things that can, our overarching theme is trying to hold the government accountable and warn as to what certain decisions, the worst case scenario out of certain decisions that the government makes, whether it be spending or power that's given to them through legislation, all of this kind of stuff. And so pretty much the number one thing that I see across social media platforms being commented in regards to our content is, well, what do we do about this? I'm not doing this so that we can create change on a worldwide scale. I don't think that's possible. I tend to believe that the world kind of has its own destination, and individuals can choose how they live within that world. And so I want to give individuals the information to make informed decisions on their own.
Yes.
Not necessarily change the circumstances. But this is kind of goes to this point about, I think, when you first start taking in the perspectives that say we have on things, it can become very, it can become depressing in a sense too, because you like to think that everybody in power has the best intentions and they're doing it for the public good,
decent,
and that public servants serve the public. But then you realize that, it's all just a big money laundering machine, just stealing your tax dollars.
Yes. And everybody's in on it,
and they really like power, and they really like power and control, and they really actually don't.
And
care
the ladies
about
at the top are all psychopaths. Yeah, cool.
And then you go, oh shit. It can be kind of gloomy after that. But then again, this is even where being able to Epictetus's point about being able to frame your judgments and change your perspective on things to better suit you is you can even go, okay, let me zoom out a little bit more and go, oh, this has been how all of human history has been. So should I really, if this is in the world kept going anyways, then maybe I shouldn't become extremely upset or depressed about this if this is just the way the world works.
I think ultimately he encourages taking responsibility for your own mind and your responses rather than blaming outside forces. I think that's really what it's about. And I see it very much the same way. When you look at the car accident, it's like, it's maybe not your fault that it happened, but it's how you manage it and how you deal with it. So it's like I said, 99% of life really, I also do think that 99% of life really is your responsibility and your fault, and fault, good or bad. If you win something, that's your fault. If you lose something, that's your fault. 99% of it is all on you. Sometimes you're in circumstances that aren't necessarily your fault, but I still think you need to default to I will take responsibility for my emotions and how I handle this. So yeah, pretty much, I can sum it up to say 100%, but yeah, it's just in different. I think that sometimes you can blame external things. I think just be cautious of that, because you still have the responsibility to manage that properly emotionally and mentally, so that you don't allow yourself to become a victim of circumstance. Actually, and just to top this off, I think I actually give like a personal antidote to a reframing or a judgment on a situation that vastly improved my mental health once I started doing this. Was, okay, there was somebody in my life that was close to me who I have always made very unorthodox life decisions, whether it be trying to go after a music career, whether I put a lot of focus into this kind of stuff, right? Like I have never. You're not an accountant. Yeah, I got it.
I've never applied myself to the 9-to-5 blueprint.
No.
Go to university.
No.
Get married, have kids, live out the days.
I had a 9-to-5 job for like 2 years when I was like in my early 20s.
Right.
Has it. It's so wild.
And so I've never taken that path. And somebody that can only see the world through that path and going, no, that's what you're supposed to do, and the only thing you're supposed to do, and can't really understand that there might be kind of more unique, or even just that somebody might want to go a different path. What I always took that as was a form of judgment, and I took that person's perspective as like, oh, Liam's an idiot for doing this, right?
I mean, they're not wrong about that.
So I always had a very, very negative mindset about how this person viewed my life choices. And it weighed heavily on me a lot, to the point where I was around them, it would stress me out, kind of stuff, even though it was kind of unspoken. But then I was able to reframe it in my own mind and go, oh, it's that this person cares about me and they think these life choices lead to an unstable life, which
Right.
maybe they're not wrong about. But I'm willing to take on that risk
Yes.
to be able to try to live a life by my own accord.
Yeah.
So instead of framing it as like disapproval in their mind, which I lived my entire life up till like 26, 27 feeling that way about it. But then once I was able to pivot it, it was, oh, this person just cares about me and doesn't want to see me in a bad scenario. And that's where this kind of judgment is coming from. Then all of a sudden it's actually a positive thing, because in your mind you go, yeah, maybe they don't understand it. Maybe they wouldn't want to take the same path, but it's
coming from love.
It's love and care. It's not just negative judgment.
Yeah, you know what's funny? I could say the exact same thing. Like my mom specifically, she has no idea what I do. I've worked for myself for 15 years. My mom's got no clue what I do. She comes from this perspective. Oh, Jonathan, get a job. She worked for the government. So she's always, go be a lawyer, go be a doctor, go get a job. And all the things that she doesn't really understand them. She stopped kind of chiming in on it, but it's interesting because like I understood that from like, yeah, probably around the same age. I'm a little older than you. So probably around that same time, I was like, oh, you just care about me, but you don't understand. You just don't understand my path. We're good. I understand. It's cool. I've been good with her about all that stuff ever since, but it does take that shift, that mindset shift to be like, oh, you're not challenging and you're not, it's weird because to me, it felt more like I was being challenged. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, you're not actually challenging me. You don't understand what you can't actually be challenging me because you don't know what I do. You just care about me and want me to be okay.
Right.
And you think that your path to success
is the only path to be.
Yes. So it's, yeah, no, I totally agree with that perspective.
All right. Anything else you wanted to add today?
That is everything.
All right. Before we get out of here, don't forget to head over to our Substack where you can subscribe to our newsletter, which goes out 5 days a week. It also has the sources for everything we talk about throughout the podcast. You can find that at blendrnews.substack.com, BLENDR news.substack.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Bye, everybody.